Hi friends, continuing to the chapter How to Win Friends and Influence People. The big secret of dealing with people. There is only one way under high heaven to get anybody to do anything. Did you ever stop to think of that? Yet, just one way. And this is by making the other person what to do with. Remember, there is no other way. Of course, you can make someone want to give you off which was sticking a revolver in his ribs. You can make your employees give your corporation until your back is turned by threatening to fire them. You can make a child do what you want it to do by a whip or a threat. But these cruel methods have sharply undesirable repercussions. The only way I can get you to do anything is by giving you what you want. What do you want? Sigmund Freud said that everything you, I, and do springs from two motivates: the sex urge and the desire to be great. Johnny Dewey, one of the America's most fond philosopher, phrased it a bit difficulty. Dr. Drew said that the deepest urge in human nature is the desire to be important. Remember the phrase, the desire to be important. It is significant. You are going to hear a lot about in this book. Why do we what do you want? Not many things, but the few things that you do wish. You crave with an intensive that will not be denied. Some of the things most people want, including health and a preservation of life. Second, food. Third, sleep. Fourth, money and the things money will buy. Fifth, life in the hereafter. Sixth, sexual gratification. Seventh, the well-being of our children. Eighth, a feeling of importance. Almost all these wants are usually gratified, all except one. But there is one longing, almost as deep, almost as imperious as the desire for food or sleep, which is seldom gratified. It is what Freud call the desire to be great. It is what Dwelling calls the desire to be important. Lincoln once began a letter saying everybody like a compliment. William James said the deepest principle in human nature is the carving to be aspirated. He didn't speak, mind you, of the wish or the desire or the longing to be appreciated. He said that the craving to be appreciated. Here is a canving and a unflattering human hunger, and the rare individuals who honestly satisfies his heart hunger with whole people in the palm of his or hand, and even the undertaker will be sorry when he dies. The desire for a feeling of importance is one of the chief distinguish between mankind and the animals. To illustrate, when I was a farm boy out in Missouri, my father bred with fine Duro Jersey hocks and pedigreed white facial cattle. We used to exhibit are hogs and white-faced cattle at the country's fair and livestock shows throughout the Middle West. We won first prizes by the score. My father pinned his blue ribbon on a sheet of a white muslin, and when friends or visitors came to the house, he would get out to the long sheet of muslin. He would hold one end and I would hold the other while he exhibits the blue ribbons. The hogs didn't care about the ribbons they had won, but fathers did. These prizes gave him a feeling of importance. In our ancestors hadn't had it this flaming urge for a feeling of importance. Civilization would have been impossible. Without it, we should have been just about like animals. It was this desire for a feeling of importance that led an uneducated, poverty stricken grocery clerk to study some lost books he found in the bottom of a barrel of thousand-old plunder that he had brought for 50 cents. You have probably heard of this grocery clerk. His name was Lincoln. It was the desire for a feeling of importance that inspired Dickinson to write his immortal novels. This desire inspires Sir Christopher Wren to design his symphonies in stone. This desire made Rockefeller millions that he never spent, and the same desire make the richest family in your town build a house for too large for their requirements. This desire make you want to wear the latest styles, drive the latest cars, and talk about your brilliant children. It is this desire that lures many boys and girls into joining gangs and engaging in criminal activities. The average young criminals, according to E.P. Mulroney, one-time police commissioner of New York, is filled with ego, and his first request after arrest is for those lurid newspaper that made him out a hero. The disagreeable prospects of serving times seem remote so long as he can gloat over his likeness, sharing space with the picture of sports figure, moving and TV stars and the politicians. If you tell me how you get your feelings, if you tell me how you get your feelings or importance, I will tell you what you are. That determines your character. That is the most significant things about you. For example, John D. Rockefeller got his feelings of importance by giving money to erect a modern hospitals in Peking, China, to take care for millions of the people, poor people whom he had never ever seen and never would see. Digliner, on the other hand, got his feelings of importance by being a bandit, a bank robber and killer. When the FBI agents were haunting him, he dashed into a farmhouse up in Minnesota and said, "I am Dillinger." He was proud of the fact that he was a public enemy number one. "I am not going to hurt you, but I am Dingler," he said. Yes, the one significant difference between Dingler and the Rockefeller is how they got their feelings of importance. History sparkles with amusing examples of famous people struggling for a feeling of importance. Even George Washington wants to be called His Mightiness the President of the United States, and Columbus pleaded for the title Admiral of the Ocean and the Victory of India. The Catherine the Great refused to open the letter that were not addressed to Her Imperial Majesty, and Mr. Lincoln in the White House turned upon Mrs. Grant like a tigress and shouted, "How dare you be seated in my presence until I invite you?" Our millionaires helped finance Admiral Brigade expedition to the Antarctic in 1928 with the understanding the range of icy mountain would be named after them, and the Victor Hugo aspired to have nothing less than the city of Paris renamed in his honor. Even Shakespeare, mightiest of the mighty, tried to add luxury to his name by pronouncing a coat of arms for his family. People sometimes became individuals in order to win sympathy and the attention and the feelings of importance. For example, take Mr. McKinley. She got a feeling of importance by forcing her husband, the President of the United States, to neglect important affairs of the states which he reclined while he reclined on the bedside for hours at a time, his arms about her, soothing near to sleep. She fed her groaning desires for attention by insisting that he remains with her while she was having her teeth fixed, and once created a stony scene when he had to leave her home with the dentist while he kept an appointment with John Hay, his Secretary of State. The writer Mary Robert Reinhardt once told me of a bright, vigorous young woman who became an invalid in order to get a feelings of importance. One day, said Mr. Reinhardt, this woman has been obliged to face something. Her age, perhaps. The lonely years were stretching ahead, and there was a little left for her to anticipate. She took to her bed, and for 10 years her old mother travelled to the third floor and back, carrying trays, nursing her. Then one day the old mother, weary with service, lay down and died. For some weeks the invalid lounged. Then she got up, put on her clothing, and resumed living again. Some authorities declare that the people may actually go incense in order to find in the dreamland of insanity the feeling of importance that has been denied them in the harsh world of reality. There are more patients suffering from mental diseases in the United States than for all others diseases combined. What is the cause of insanity? Nobody can answer such a sweeping question, but we know that certain diseases such as syphilis, breakdowns, and the destroy the brain cells and the result is insanity. In fact, about one half of all mental diseases can be attributed to such physical causes as brain lesions, alcohol, toxics, and the injuries. But the other half, and this is a appealing part of the story, the other half of the people who incense apparently have nothing originally wrong with their brain cells. In postmortem examination, where their brain tissues are studied under the high powered microscopes, these tissues are found to be apparently just as healthy as yours and mine. Why does these people go insane? I put the question to the head physician of one of your most important psychotherapist hospitals. This doctor, who has received the highest honor and the most coveted award for his knowledge of this subject. He told me frankly that he didn't know why people went into incense. Nobody knows for sure. But he did say that many people who go incense find in instantly a feeling of importance that they were unable to achieve in the world of reality. Then he told me this story. I have a patient right now whose marriage proves to be a tragedy. She wanted love, sexual gratification, children, and the social prestige. But life blasted her all her hopes. Her husband didn't love her, refused even to eat with her, and forced her to serve his meal in the room upstairs. She had no children, no social standings. She went incense, and in her imagination, she divorced her husband and resumed her maiden name. She now believes that she has married to a English aristocracy, and she insists on being called Lady Smith. And as of for the children, she imagined now that she has had a new child every night. Each time I call on her, she says, "Doctor, I had a baby last night." Life once wrecked all her dreams, ship on the sharp rocks of reality. But in the sunny fantasy-isness of insanity, all her barkingtons race into the sport with caravans billowing and wind sings through the mast. Tragic. Oh, I don't know. Her physician said to me, if I could stretch out my hand and restore her sanity, I wouldn't do it. She much happier as she is. If some people are so hungry for a feeling of importance that they actually go incense to get it, imagine what miracle you and I can achieve by giving people honest appreciation this side of insanity. One of the first people in American business to be paid a salary of over $1 million a year, when there was no income tax and the person earning $50 a week was considered well off, was Charles Schwab. He has been picked by Andrews to become the first president of the newly formed United States Steel Company in 1921. When Schwab was only 38 years old, Schwab later left that US Steel Company to take over the then troubled Beltham Steel Company, and he rebuilt it into one of the most profitable companies in America. Why did Andrew pay $1 million a year or more than $3,000 a day to Charles Schwab? Why? Because Schwab was genius? No, because he knew the more about the manufacturer of steel other than other people. Nonsense. Charles Schwab told me himself that he had many men working for him who knew more about the manufacture of the steel than he did. Schwab says that he was paid the salary largely because of his ability to deal with the people. I asked him how he did it. Here is the secret to set down in his own words. Words that ought to be the cast in external bronze and hung in every homes and schools, every shops and office in the land. Words that children ought to be memorized instead of wasting their time memorizing the conjunctions of Latin verbs or the amount of an annual rainfall in Brazil. Words that will all but transform your life and mine if we will only live them. I consider my ability to arouse enthusiasm among my people, said Schwabs, the greatest assist I possess and the way to develop the best that is in a person is by appreciation and encouragement. There is nothing else that so kills the ambition of a person as criticism from superiors. I never criticize anyone. I believe in giving a person intensive to work. So I am anxious to praise but loath to find fault. If I like anything, I am hearty in my approbation and lavish in my praise. That is what Schwab did. But what do average people do? The exact opposite. If they don't like a thing, they bawl out their subordinates. If they don't do like it, they say nothing. As the old couplist says that once I did bad and I had ever twice I did good, but that I heard never. In my wide association in life, meeting with many and the great people in various parts of the world, Schwab declared that I have yet to find the person, however great or exalt his station, who did not do a better work and put forth greater effort under a spirit of approval than he would ever do under a spirit of criticism. Then he said frankly was one of the outstanding reasons for the phenomenal success of Andrews. Andrews praised his associates publicly as well as privately. Andrews wanted to praise his assistants even on his tombstones. He wrote an epitaph for himself, which he reads that here lies one who knew how to get around him men who were cleverer than himself. Sincere appreciation was one of the secret of first John D. Rockefeller success in handling men. For example, when one of his partner, Edward T. Bedford, lot $1 million for the firm by a bad guy in South America, John D. might have criticized, but he knew Bedford had done his best, and the incident were closed. So Rockefeller found something to praise. He congratulated Bedford because he had been able to save 60% of the money he had invested. That's splendid, said Rockefeller. We don't always do as well as the upstairs. I have among my clippings a story that I know never happened, but it illustrates a truth, so I will repeat it. According to this silly story, a farm woman at the end of a heavy day's work set before her menfolk a heaping pile of hay, and when they indignantly depended whether she had gone crazy, she replied, "Why, how did I know you would have noticed? I have been cooking for you men for the last 20 years, and in all that time I ain't heard no words to let me know you wasn't just eating hay." When a study made a few years ago on a runaway wives, what do you think was discovered to be the main reasons wives ran away? It was a lack of appreciation, and I would bet the similar study made of runaway hundreds would come out of the same way. We often take our spouses so much for granted, and we never let them know we appreciate them. A member of one of our classes told of a request made by his wife. She and a group of other women in her church were involved in a self improvement program. She asked her husband to help her by listing 6 things he believed that could do help her become a better wife. Her reported to the classes, "I was surprised by such a request. Frankly, it would have been easy for me to list 6 things I would like to change about her. My heavens! She could have listed 1,000 things she would like to change about me, but I didn't. I said to her, 'Let me think about it and give you an answer in the morning.' The next morning I got up early and I called the florist and had them send 6 red roses to my wife with a note saying that I can't think of 6 things I would like to change about you. I love you the way you are." When I arrived at the home that evening, why do you think greeted me at the door? That's right, my wife. She was almost in tears. Needless to say, I was extremely glad I have not criticized her as she had requested. The following Sunday at the church, after she had reported the result for her assignment, several women with whom she had been studying came up to me and said, "That's what the most considerable things I have ever heard." I was then realized the power of appreciation. Florence, the most spectacular producer who ever dazzled Broadway, gained her reputation by his subtle ability to glorify the American girl. Time after the time, he took drag little creatures that no one ever looked at twice and transformed them on the stage into a glamorous vision of mystery and seductions. Knowing the value of the appreciation and the confidence, he made women feel beautiful by the cheer's power of his gallantry and consideration. He was partial. He raised the salary of chorus girls for $30 and week to the as highest as 155. And he was also chivalrously saying on opening nights at the Flossels, he went telegrams to the stars in the cast, and he declared every chorus girls in the shows with the American Beauty roses. I once submitted to the fate of fasting and went for 6 days and nights without eating. It wasn't difficult. I was less hungry at the end of the 6th day than I was at the end of the second. Yet I know, as you know, people who think they had committed a crime if they let the families or employees go for 6 days without food, but they will let them go for 6 days and 6 weeks and sometimes 60 years without them the heartily appreciation that they crave almost as much as they crave food. When Alfred Lunt, one of the greatest actors of his time, played the leading role in Reunion in Vienna, he said that there is nothing I need so much as nourishment for my self esteem. We nourish the bodies of our children and friends and employees, but how seldom do we nourish their self esteem? We provide them with the roast beef and potatoes to build energy, but we neglect to give them a kind words of appreciation that would sing in the memories for years like the music of the morning stars. Paul Harvey is one on his radio broadcasts. The rest of the story told him that showering sincere appreciation can change a person's life. He reported that years ago, a teacher in the Detroit asked Steve Morris to help her to find a mouse that was lost in the classroom. You see, she appreciated fact that the nature has given Steve something no one else in the room had. Nature had given Steve a remarkable pair of ears to compensate for his blind eyes. But this was really the first time Steve had been shown his appreciation for those talented ears. Now, years later, he says that this act of appreciation was the beginning of a new life. You see, from that time on, he developed his gift of hearing and went on to become under the stage name of Steve Wonders, one of the greatest pop singer and the songwriter of the 70s. Some readers are saying right now, as they read these lines, "Oh phony, flattery, beer oil." Some readers are saying right now, as they have read these lines, "Oh puffy, flattery, beer oil, I have tried the snuff, it doesn't work. Not with the intelligent people." Of course, flattery seldom works with discerning peoples. It is shallow, selfish and insincere. I ought to fail, and it usually does. True, some people are so hungry, so thirsty for appreciation that they will swallow anything, just as a starving man will eat grass and a fish worms. Even Queen Victoria was susceptible to flattery. Prime Minister Benjamin confessed that he put it on his thick in dealing with the Queen. To use his exact word, he said he spread it on with a trowel. But Disraeli was one of the most polished, deft and adroit men who ever ruled the far-flung British Empire. He was a genius in his life. What would work for him wouldn't necessarily work for you and me. In the long run, flattery will do you more harm than good. Flattery is counterfeit, and like a counterfeit money, it will eventually get you into the trouble if you pass it to someone else. The difference between the appreciation and the flattery, that is simple. One is sincere and the other is insincere. One comes from the heart out, the other from the teeth out. One is unselfish, the other is selfish. One is universally admired, the other is universally condemned. I recently saw a bust of a Mexican hero, General Alvaro Obregón, in the place in the Mexico City. Below the bust or craft, these wise words from the General Obregón philosophy: don't be afraid of enemies who attacked you. Be afraid of the friends who flattered you. No, no, no. I am not suggesting flattery. Far from it. I am just talking about a new way of life. Let me repeat. I am talking about a new way of life. King George V has a set of 6 maxims displayed on the wall of his study at Buckingham's Palace. One of these maxims said that teach me neither to proffer non revise cheap price. That's all flattery is, cheap price. I once read a definition of a flattery that may be worth repeating. Flattery is telling the person precisely what he thinks about himself. Use what languages you will, said Ralph Emerson. You can never say anything but what you are. If all we had to do was flatter, everybody would catch on, and we should all be except in the human relations. When we are not engaged in thinking about some definite problem, we usually spend about 95% of our time thinking about ourselves. Now, if we stop thinking about ourselves for a while and being to think of the other person, good points, we won't have to resort to the flattery so cheap and the false that it can be spotted almost before it is out of the mouth. One of the most neglected virtues of our daily existence is appreciation. Somehow we neglect to praise our son or daughter when he or she brings a home good report card, and we fail to encourage our children when they first succeed in baking a cake or building a bird house. Nothing please children more than this kind of a parental interest and approval. The next time you enjoy Fleet Maggin at the club, send words to the chef that it was extremely preferred. And when a tired salesperson shows you unusual courtesy, please mention it. Every ministers, lecturers, and the public speakers know the discouragements of pouring himself or herself out to an audience and not receiving a single ribbon of a appreciation command. What applies to the professionals appreciates doubly to the workers in office, shops, factories, our families and friends. In our interpersonal relations, we should never forget that all our associates are human beings and hunger for appreciations. Is this a legal tender that all souls enjoy? Try leaving a friendly trail of little sparks of gratitudes on your daily trips. You will be surprised how they will set small flames of friendship that will be rose becomes on your next visit. Pamela Dunstan of New Fairfield, Connecticut, had among her responsibility on her job the supervising of an janitor who was doing a very poor job. The other employees would jeer at him, and the litter the hallways to show him what a bad job he was doing. It was so bad, productivity time was being lost in the shop. Without success, Palm tried various ways to motivate this person. She noticed that occasionally he did a particularly good piece of work. She made a point to praise him for it in the front of the other people. Each day, the job he did all around got better, and pretty soon he started doing all his work efficiently. Now he does an excellent job, and the other people give him appreciation and recognition. Honest appreciation got results where criticisms and the ridicule failed. Hurting people not only does not change them, it is never called for. There is an old saying that I have cut out and pasted on my mirror where I cannot help but see it every day. I shall pass this way but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to any human beings, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. Emerson said, every man I met is my superior in somewhat in that I learn of him. Is that was a true of a Emerson, isn't it? Likely to be 1,000 times more true of you and me. Let's cease thinking of your accomplishments or wants. Let's try to figure out the other good person's good points. Then forget flattery. Give honest, sincere appreciation. Be hearty in your observations and lavish in your praise. And people will cherish your words and treasure them and repeat them over your lifetime. Repeat them, your words, after you have forgotten them. Give honest and sincere appreciation. I often went fishing up in Maine during the summer. Personally, I am very fond of strawberries and cream, but I have found that for some strange reasons, fish prefer warm. So, when I went fishing, I often went fishing up in Maine during the summer. Personally, I am very fond of strawberries and cream, but I have found that for some strange reasons, fish prefer worms. So, when I went fishing, I don't think about what I wanted. I thought about what they wanted. I didn't bait the hook with the strawberries and cream. Rather, I dangled a worm or a grasshopper in the front of the fish and said, wouldn't you like to have that? Why not use the same common sense when fishing for the people? That is what Lord George, Great Britain Prime Minister during World War I did. When someone asked him how he managed to stay in the power after the others wartime dealers, Wilson, Orlando, and Clemente had been forgotten, he replied that if his staying to his having learned that it was necessary to be bait the hook to shoot the fish. What talk about what we want? This is childish, absurd. Of course, you are interested in what you want. You are eternally interested in it, but no one else is. The rest of us are just like you. We are interested in what we want. So, the only way on the earth to influence other people is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. Remember that tomorrow, when you are trying to get somebody to do something, if, for example, you don't want your children to smoke, don't preach at them and don't talk about what you want, but show them that cigarette may keep them for making the basketball team or winning the 100-yard dash. This is a good thing to remember regardless of whether you are dealing with the children or cows or chimpanzees. For example, One day, Ralph Waldo Emerson and his son tried to get a calf in the barn, but they made the common mistake of thinking only of what they wanted. Emerson puts and his son pulled, but the calf was doing just what they were doing. He was thinking only of what he wanted. So he stiffened his leg and stubbornly refused to leave the pasture. The Irish homemaid saw their predicament. She couldn't write essay and books, but on these occasions at least she had more horses sense or call sense that Emerson had. She thought of what the calf wanted, so she put their material finger in the calf mouth and let the calf suck her finger, and she gently led him to the barn. Every action you have ever performed since the day you were born was performed because you wanted something. How about the time you gave a large contribution to the Red Cross? Yes, there is no expectation to the rules. You gave the Red Cross the donation because you wanted to lend a helping hand. You wanted to do a beautiful, unselfish, divine act. Inasmuch as you have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. If you haven't wanted that feelings more than you wanted your money, you would not have made the contribution. Of course, you might have made the contribution because you were ashamed to refuse or because a customer asked you to do it. But one thing is certain, you made the contribution because you want something to do. Harry Ye, across street, in his illumination book Influencing Human Behavior, said that action springs out of what we fundamentally desire, and the best piece of advice which can be given to you would be pursuits, whether in the business, in the home, in the school, in the politics, is first arose in the other person an eager wants. He who can do this has a whole world with him. He who cannot walk a lonely way. Andrews, the poverty-stricken Scotchland who started to work at 2 cents an hour and finally gave away $365 million, learned early in his life that the only way to influence people is to talk in the terms of what the other person wants. He attended schools only 4 years, yet he learned how to handle people. To illustrate, his sister-in-law was worried sick over her 2 boys. They were ill and they were so busy with their own affairs and they neglected to write a home and paid no attention whatever to their mom's frantic letters. Then Andrews offered to wager $100 that he could get an answer by the written mail. Without even asking for it, someone called his bet. So he wrote his nephew a chatty letter, mentioning casually in a postscript that he was spending each one a $5 bill. He neglected, however, to enclose the money. Back came replies by written mails thanking Dear Uncle Andrew for this kind note, and you can finish the sentence yourself. Another example of pursuing comes from Stan Novak of Cleveland, Ohio. A participant is in our course. Stan came home for a work one evening to find his youngest son, Tim, kicking and screaming on the living room floor. He was to start a kindergarten the next day and was protesting that he would not to go. Stan's normally reaction would have been to banish the child to his room and tell him that he would just better make up his mind to go. He had no choice. But tonight, recognizing that this would not really help, Tim starts kindergarten in the best frame of mind. Stan sat down and thought, if I were Tim, why would I be excited about going to kindergarten? He and his wife made a list of all the fun things. Tim would do such a finger paintings, singing songs, making new friends. Then they put them into an action. We all started finger paintings on the kitchen table. My wife Lil and my other son Bob and myself all having fun. Soon Tim was peeping around the corner. Next he was begging to participate. Oh no, you have to go to kindergarten first to learn how to finger paint. With all the enthusiasm I could muster, I went through the list, talking in the terms he could understand, telling him all the fun he would have in the kindergarten. The next morning, I thought I was the first one up. I went downstairs and found Tim sitting sound asleep in the living room chair. What are you doing here? I asked. I am waiting to go to kindergarten. I don't want to be late. The enthusiasm of our entire family has aroused in Tim, and eager wants to that no amount of discussions or the threat could have possibly accomplished. Tomorrow you may want to persuade somebody to do something. Before you speak, pause and ask yourself, how can I make this person want to do it? That question will stop us from rushing into a situations heedlessly with futile chatters about our desires. At one time, I rented the ballroom of a certain New York hotel for 20 nights in each session in order to hold a service of lectures. At the beginning of one season, I was suddenly informed that I should have to pay almost 3 times as much as rent as formerly. This news reached me after the ticket had been printed and distributed and all an announcement had been made. Naturally, I don't want to pay the increase, but what's the use of talking to the hotel about what I wanted? They were interested only in what they wanted. So a couple of days later, I went to see the manager. I was a bit shocked and I got you a letter. I said, but I don't blame you at all. I have been in your position. I should probably have written a similar letters myself. Your duty as a manager of the hotel is to make all the profit possible. If you don't do that, you will be fired and you ought to be fired. Now take a piece of paper and write down the advantages and the disadvantages that will accurate to you if you insist on the increase in the rent. Then I took a letterhead and ran a line through the center and headed one column advantages and the other column as disadvantages. I wrote down under the head advantages these words: ball room free. Then I went on to say, you will have the advantages of having the ballroom free to the rent for dancing and conventions. That is a big advantage for the affairs like that will pay you a more than that you get to a series of lectures. If I tie your ballroom up for 20 nights during the course of the season, it is sure to mean a loss of some very profitable business to you. Now let's consider the disadvantages. First, instead of increasing your income from me, you are going to decrease it. In fact, you are going to wipe it out because I cannot pay the rent you are asking. I shall be forced to hold these lectures at some other place. There another advantage to you also. These lectures attracts crowds of educated and the cultural peoples to your hotel. That is a good advertisement for you, isn't it? In fact, if you spend $5,000 advertisement in the newspaper, you couldn't bring up many people to look at your hotel as I bring up these lecturers. That is worth a lot to a hotel, isn't it? As I talked, I wrote these two disadvantages under a proper heading and handed the sheets of paper to the manager, saying, I wish you would carefully consider both the advantages and the disadvantages that are going to be accurate to you and then give me your final decision. I received a letter the next day informing me that my rent would be increased only 50% instead of 300%. Mind you, I got this reduction without saying a word about what I wanted. I talked all the time about what the other person wanted and how he could get it. Suppose I have done the human natural things. Suppose I have stormed into his office and said, what do you mean by raising my rent 3 times 300% when you know that ticket has been printed and the announcement made? 300%? Ridiculous, absurd, I won't pay it. What would have happened then? An argument would have begun to steam and boil and sputter. And you know how argument ends. Even if I had convinced him that he was wrong, his pride would have made it difficult for him to back down and give in. Here is one of the best bits of advice ever given about the fine arts of human relationships. If there is any one secret of success, said Henry Ford, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see the things from the person's angle as well as from our own. That is so good. I want to repeat it. If there is anyone's secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view, see things from that person's angle as well as from your own. This is so simple, so obvious that anyone ought to see the truth of it at a glance, yet 90% of the people on this earth ignore it 90% of the time. An example, look at the letter that come across your desk tomorrow morning and you will find that most of these violate this important canon of common sense. Take this letter, a letter written by the head of radio department on an advertising agencies with office chartered across the continent. This letter was sent to the manager of the local radio station throughout the country. I have set down in the brackets my reasons to each paragraph. Mr. John Blank, Bankwile, Indiana. Dear Mr. Blank, the company desires to retain its position in advertising agency leadership in the radio field. Who cares what your company desires? I am worried about my own problems. The bank is foreclosing the mortgage on my house. The bugs are destroying the hollyhocks. The stock market stumbled yesterday. I missed the 8:15 in the morning. I was invited to the Jones dance last night. The doctor tells me that I have a high blood pressure and neurotic and dandruff. And then what happened? I come down to the office in this morning, worried, open my mail, and here is some little whispering napper off in New York yapping about what his company wants. Bah, if he only realized that what sort of impression his letter makes, he would get out of the advertising business and start manufacturing sheep dig. This agency national advertisement account were the bulwark of the network. Our subsequent clearance of the station time have kept us at the top of the agencies year after year. If you are big and rich and right at the top, are you? So what? I don't give two oops in hips if you are as big as General Motors and General Electricals and the General Staff of US Army all combined. If you had as much sense as half-whitened hummingbird, you would realize that I am interested in how big I am, not how big you are. All this talk about your enormous success made me feel smaller and unimportant. We desire to service our accounts with the last word on radio station information. You desire, you unmitted ass. I am not interested in what you desire or what the President of the United States desire. Let me tell you one and for all that I am interested in what I deserve. And you haven't said a word about that yet in the absurd letters of yours. Will you therefore put the company on your preferred list for weekly station information? Every single detail that will be useful to an agency's in intellectually booking time. Preferred list. You have your nerve. You make me feel insignificant by your big talks about your company, and then you ask me to put you on a preferred list, and you don't even say please when you ask it. A prompt acknowledgement of these letters, giving it you a latest doings, will be mutually helpful. Thank you.